On.
Hey Joe, how you doing, buddy?
Good, Tony. How are you, man?
Okay, Nico is having troubles logging in to Zoom, which I shouldn't complain about Zoom, I guess, but I'm always holding my breath. I've had so many difficulties dealing with Zoom. Um, I'm sure there are other platforms out there, and maybe down the line we'll have to look into that. But yeah, we'll see if Nico joins us today. I hope so, but outside
Yeah.
of that, it's just scary with this thing.
Well, yeah, we just, we're flying with no nets, right? Although I guess we could always start over, but we're not like that, right? We just take it as it comes. This is a live
Yes.
broadcast.
Yes, take it. That's right. No nets here, like the old Carl Walenda group, which I remember seeing him falling off the high wire. I believe it was in Puerto Rico when it happened. And they showed it on the news. I was a young kid, not like 5 years old, but probably preteen. And that was shocking to me to see it on the local news, him actually falling. And I remember the wind and he was swaying and then he tried to sit down on the tightrope and he plummeted. Oh,
Oh man. So that's like, was it between like two buildings or just two?
I would imagine it was that. I don't recall because they didn't show that part of it. They just showed him walking, and then he paused and he was like this, trying to get his balance, swaying back and forth. Tried to kneel down, and then he tilted, if I remember correctly, to his left side. Um, and I thought he made a gallant effort to try to grab the rope, but I don't know. That was it. And yeah, it's you don't ever want to see that. But he was elderly at that point in time. He was up there in age. I can't even walk a straight line, let alone a tightrope.
um, yeah, I remember there's some movie out there. There's some guy who did it between the World Trade Centers. Do you
Oh
remember?
yeah, I remember that. Philippe Petit, French, and yep, he surreptitiously got into the one building, accessed the roof, shot it across the other building, I believe, with some sort of a crossbow mechanism. And I
Wow.
believe that was in 73 or 74. I was really young. And yeah, you talk about daring. I mean, well, and you had that guy here. I forgot. I thought his name was George something. I wasn't living in Chicago at the time. I was still in Cleveland. But he scaled the outside of the
Oh,
Sears Tower at the
you're
time.
talking Spider Dan Goodwin, I think. That was
Yeah, Spider. Yeah, whatever his name was. Yep.
Yeah, it was like I think his name was Dan, and so they call him Spider Dan. But I think his son told him to. He was a rock climber, like a fairly accomplished rock climber, and
Mm.
I think he had a family or something. But his son, like for his son, he dressed up as Spider Man. But he did both the John Hancock and the Sears Tower here. Um, what's crazy about it too is because obviously it's illegal. Is that at a certain point, the cops become aware of it because it takes a while to climb up, 1,400 feet, and they're like trying to not knock him off the building, but either force him towards windows where they can grab him. I mean, they were actively trying to prevent him from getting there. But um, yeah, and I think he's done some other famous buildings too. I remember reading up on him. But yeah, Chicago guy. I think for some reason I thought there was a Degerberg connection with him too, because he came up because I mean he was kind of he was in the news and kind of well known if you grew up in the 70s and 80s in the Chicago here. And I guess obviously if you heard of him in Cleveland, but at that time the Sears was the tallest building in the world. And
Yeah.
yeah, crazy. Yeah, I'm always kind
Well,
of amazed, people taking those kind of risks.
yeah, the biggest probably that I can think of in my time was Daredevil was Evil Knievel, um, which was kind of interesting because he just jumped. Uh, he didn't do a lot of research on things, and he didn't actually ride a bike that was conducive to jumping compared to his son or others nowadays that just go much longer distances. But yeah, he was I mean, I'm sure there was always daredevils. Back remember people you read about people going over the Niagara Falls in a barrel and things like that.
Dude, have you ever been to Niagara Falls? And I'm sure you must have,
Yeah,
you've been all over. The power of that water, like not me, buddy. No, I can't. Like you get close to that you can feel how like if you step off, there's no stopping. You're going to go over, and you're going to go hard. It's crazy. I don't, yeah, it's definitely, I've definitely got some lines I'm not crossing or, yeah, it's when you feel the power of it, it's like a train going by you, the force of the water, it's moving at such a rate and so much mass, of waters going by. It's really kind of feels small as a human. You realize in the scale of certain like physical phenomena, and you're just like an ant, and that's like Niagara Falls to me is like that. Beautiful place. I mean, yeah, every American, it's one of those things you should go and see both sides actually. You get over to the Canadian side. Um, but yeah, and even like what's crazy to me is we're talking about Daredevils is how like, now with YouTube and camera phones and everything, I mean, you're aware of parkour, of course, all these kids who are running around, jumping, doing gymnastics. And they're like, I watch videos of it because it is fascinating and it's amazing to see what these people can accomplish. But, if you've done any kind of gymnastics or rock climbing before, you know, clearly, like when you practice gymnastics, you're doing it with mats and crash pads and foam pits because the likelihood of you messing up, there's a good percentage, that these moves you're doing, you're going to wipe out. And the risks that these kids are taking, I'm surprised that we're not seeing more. And maybe it's just not being reported, but I just don't know how people are not really messed up, just broken arms, broken, these kids are jumping off of roofs. I mean, it's fun to watch, but even like when you do rock climbing, if you're more than a few feet off the ground, you generally want to have a rope. There's people, another movie you should see or check out is this thing called Free Solo. Have you heard of this?
no,
It's this guy who, and I imagine, I don't remember all the details, but he, without ropes, that's why it's called free soloing. He does, is it El Capitan in Yosemite? 3,000 feet up of rock, in a single day climb. He just makes it all the way up. But, one mess up, one wrong grab, you're dead, basically. You're falling to your death. Even though you're watching the movie and you're like, well, they're not going to have a movie if the guy doesn't make it. It's still terrifying to watch, especially it's like these high def and, big screen TVs. You could really get a sense of the scale of it. But yeah, it's kind of definitely impressed with those people who are willing to do that. But yeah, if you see, I mean, and I think there was some other climber in that movie where they talked about where someone did fall, and obviously all the cameramen around, they talk to them and they're like, how horrible they feel. Like they're almost as anxious because they're like, we could actually be there at the moment recording when he misses, misses a hold or whatever and falls, and there's nothing they can do, you know. But yeah, crazy stuff.
same
Um,
with base jumpers. That chute doesn't open. I mean, it's base jumping is the another extreme thing, and they voluntarily do this. I mean, it's kind of different than like military, like a halo jump, but ultimately, I mean, I think they open their chutes maybe at a lower altitude even than halo jumpers, but I wouldn't know. But yeah, I don't. It's there's a lot of risk takers out there, man. But of course, in a lot of ways, all of us take risks that sometimes we're aware of, sometimes we're not.
that's true. I mean, everybody's always worried about shark attacks and things like that, but every time you step into a car, that's the most likely place you'll probably die is in a car accident or something. That's the most risk you're probably putting
Well,
yourself at.
that's what street fighting. If you're getting in a really violent encounter, it is like these guys. You one wrong move on your end, be it verbally or physically or whatever, your life could be over. It really, no matter, like even with these rock climbers, let's use that as an example. Sure, they train, they have skill, But you can't tell me that every time they climbed, there wasn't like one little precarious incident, right? Where something could have went wrong, and maybe they want to call it luck, maybe they don't, but they made it. That's how it is in a street encounter. Something, anything could turn the tables, man, and you could end up in trouble. That's why you have to kind of take, like they do, the Daredevils. I've always approached it where you have to take that death part, your death. You have to kind of take that element out of it. I mean, if you cherish your life so much or everything else, and now, man, you've worked yourself up into a tizzy here. You can't let that fear or whatever the emotion is. You got to make it work for you, not against you. But yeah, I remember uh, there was like even trapeze. There's been people who've gotten killed or paralyzed uh, doing the trapeze without a net. And I don't have a problem with them using a net. I'd rather them use the net. I think this way they can probably even try more dangerous moves without the risk of serious injury. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I don't that's the last thing you want to see is someone trying to just entertain you and then fail and get, possibly horribly injured or whatever. It's still an impressive feat that they're doing. Um, the other thing I was just thinking about, we were talking about all these kind of like stunt guys, is those guys who do the high dive acts, where they're
Yeah.
like up a couple hundred feet and they're, I always remember, you ever seen those Bugs Bunny ones where they keep, like they keep bringing out smaller, and eventually it's like a glass of water he
Yeah.
has to jump into.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't, yeah, that's, I guess in some ways it's the way, it must be like kind of a Zen meditative place they can get their mind to. I don't understand that, that's kind of an impressive, we've talked a lot about like mental training and getting your mental game together, but they must really have some amazing control of that. Cause I just,
Well,
yeah,
it's incremental too. I mean, you're not going to take a dive, let's say, from 10 feet, and then the next go, you're going to go from 175 to 175 feet. So, they incrementally build up their, control and their technique and their command of fear. And, you know, even those guys who set records, I think it's pushing 200 feet. Some of them, they're not like they're going a little more than someone previous. So in that regard, they know it probably can be done. I'm pushing the envelope a little bit, right? So yeah, but you wouldn't get me up there, man. I don't
what,
like heights.
have you ever done any kind of like high dive jump offs or anything?
No, I don't like heights. But and I used to never mind heights. When I was younger, I used to go on the roof, especially like when Memorial Labor Day weekend, we'd always have the air show. And one year would be the Thunderbirds, the other year would be the Blue Angels. And I lived very close to the Lake Erie, and not far from Burke Airport, where they would do it. So they would always fly over my neighborhood. Okay, they couldn't help but fly over my neighborhood. Um, so I would go on my kind of like the roof of my backyard. In my backyard, just get even a closer look with no problem. But then somewhere along the way, as years passed, I just became, I don't know if it's vertigo, I don't know what it is, but I can't even watch this stuff on television. I get queasy.
Speaking of
Right.
queasy,
Oh no.
got Nico about to join. Let's see.
I'm sick. I'm beyond queasy. I'm downright nauseous. Where is he?
Let's see. I clicked the admit button. Let's see if he's able to join in. Uh-oh.
I would never admit to it.
Um, yeah, it's funny as a kid. I don't know if this is like common for most kids. I probably not nowadays. Now they're just probably looking on their iPads all the time. But I always remember climbing things, whether it was trees, garages. We were always trying to get on like, different like kids' houses and things like that. We were just always, I think it's kind of like a natural thing to kind of climb as you're younger,
I
and
could trim trees in high school for money. Yeah, I had no problem climbing. There's Nico, and there he goes. In and here and gone. That was a quick.
he's a
Nico,
phantom.
where are you?
We'll see if he gets on there. Um, but yeah, for me, it starts to like, there's been a couple pools like in the city, Portage Park on the northwest side. They
Sure.
have
I do.
They have like the 10-meter platform there that they have, and I don't know if who uses that. It's kind of interesting that that's in a public park and a public pool, but I've never jumped off of one of those, man. That's definitely, I
Well,
think I've done off of like high dive boards, but like I am not a diver. Like it's invariably some part of me is going to slap on the water, like I can't get that perfect like dive in position where I feel comfortable hitting it. So jumping even feet first would be scary in those. So,
well,
um,
one of my ex-girlfriends was the park district diving champion, so she could do all that. We go somewhere in a hotel or motel, whatever, where they have the swimming pool, and because she did gymnastics growing up, and she'd do all these interesting flips off the diving board. It's cool.
that is cool. No, it's awesome
Yeah.
when people can do that. Yeah, I'm always impressed by that. Did you ever? So we're both at the same age. Do you remember Greg Louganis? Remember how dominant he was as an athlete? We were always kind of giving plugs to different athletes, and even he hit his head. Remember
Yeah,
that?
sure do.
Yeah,
Hey, Nico,
What's up, guys?
you made it.
live from Indiana.
So I missed part of the podcast. What's going on?
Oh man. Well, we were just talking about that big meteor that's supposed to strike the Earth in about another 30 minutes. So we're trying to get all the information in that we can.
Oh, okay.
We're trying to
Yeah,
warn
no, we're
everybody,
just
yes, to get to your shelters. So
yeah,
hopefully,
get me. Right. I know a bunch of people now that are running to the KFC to get their last chicken.
Better put on a helmet, Joe, to protect your hair.
Oh, nothing could damage his hair. Nothing. No intergalactic strike force could ever damage that.
just your disapproval, Tony. That was all. That would all. That would.
We- Yeah. We were just talking about old time Daredevils, the tightrope walkers in Evil Knievel, Carl Walenda, and the guys that scaled the Sears Tower and shit. I thought there was a guy named George Wettig or something that did something like that. I don't know why that name sticks in my head. I could be completely off base, but Dan, he mentioned some guy named Spider Dan.
He's probably too young to remember. This is like I said in the 80s. Spider Dan was like a fixture around here in Chicago. He did the John Hancock and the Sears Tower. I should try and Google that guy while we're talking here. What was his?
Yeah, Google up
What-
a George Wettig.
What did he do? He's like scaled it.
Yeah, he climbed the outside of him, and then he'd get arrested afterwards. Like he'd have to, and actually he did a cool thing. I remember hearing that like he pretended to be a newspaper guy and actually interviewed because someone had tried and failed climbing the Sears Tower before, and the police were able to stop the initial attempt. So he actually went to the police acting like a reporter and asked them how they stopped and kind of interviewed them and figured out his strategy based on that. Now, this could just be a senior moment I'm having, making that all up, but I'm pretty sure that was also part of the story, is that not only did he climb it, but he actually had to kind of almost be like a spy, like, and get intel on how to circumvent the police on it too. It's a really cool story. But I know he
Wow.
did I think he did like the CN Tower in Toronto, like most of the major big structures. I think he climbed at least in at least North America. I don't know if he did like. I wonder if someone's done the Eiffel Tower. I have no idea. And see, now all this talking, I can't remember the name. You said George somebody?
Wettig, I thought, or something like that. Maybe he was the guy that first tried it and they stopped him. They use suction cups, and that's what at least what this guy did that I'm thinking of. George, I thought his name was. I'm not good anymore, but some stuff from 100 years ago I can remember.
So these guys weren't tied off to any harness or anything.
No, they just free scaled it, and they would suction cup it on their all four limbs, and then they would pause if they needed a rest, and then one, a little at a time. At least the guy that I saw do it. I don't know. Maybe the guy that he's talking about, this Spider Dan, did something else. I don't know.
I kind of remember suction cups for the Sears Tower, but the pictures.
Well, just look up people who scaled the Sears Tower or something.
Okay.
That's what I would do, and then the list of everybody would probably come up.
Did you guys see this was probably within the past couple of years? There was a guy that tightrope walked between two high-rise buildings. I don't remember if it was Chicago or New York, but it was two really tall high-rise buildings, and he walked across the street on the tightrope from building to building.
Because we talk about that. Yeah, there was.
Yeah, that was Philippe Petit. They made a movie, I think, about him, but he did that back in the 70s. But yes, he went across the Trade Center buildings which are no longer there, obviously.
No, there was a guy that recently. That was probably within the last 4 years. I would say.
Oh, wait, dude. Yeah, there was
Might have
somebody
been him
who went
again.
across. No, was there someone who went across the Chicago River from like the
I thought it was in Chicago, but I
Oh,
could be
that
wrong.
was Walenda. That was Walenda. That was like a pay-per-view thing. And he went across a big gorge as well. That was Walenda's kid or grandson or something. Look that up. But look up the one thing first, the Trade Center or the Sears Tower thing, because
we got another guy, a Frenchman named Alain Robert of Valence, France, was arrested when he reached the top. And when was this article? 1999.
oh, well, that's
So
later.
another one. That's another one. Probably a third guy. So it's no big deal. At least 3 guys have done it. Definitely Dan Goodwin shows up. He's like,
Is there a George guy or something? Who's the first guy to do it?
let me do a list. Oh, it's also someone, they had someone here. I was going to say, the Trump Tower has not been climbed. So if someone's looking for a goal to set themselves apart. Oh, someone did you know that super huge building in Dubai, the Burj Khalifa?
Yeah.
Some guy did that, which is like, that building's so ridiculous. That's buildings as tall as like having the John Hancock on top of the Sears Tower. It's ridiculous.
Yeah, and they're planning on larger towers than that. I mean, that just boggles the mind.
How many stories is that one?
150 something, right?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's like, it's from like sci-fi.
It's over 2,000 feet tall. It's crazy. But yeah, there's, everybody gets their thrills in a different way. I mean, some of that is just, I don't know. I can't see myself doing it. I don't like heights.
I used to hate heights until I started working on high rises. I got used to it pretty quick. But you ever see how the window washers are on those spiders, the suspended scaffolding? I used to work off of those on the high rises and blasting concrete and
So you'd be
doing all kinds of stuff.
You'd be hanging
Wow.
exterior to the building?
What's that? With my ear?
No, you like when you're doing that work. So you'd be roped up on outside of the building working on it, kind of hanging on.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Shit, you got to get some pictures of that.
It's really windy, man. I would have to anchor into the wall, to the concrete, and tie off the scaffolding. See, the window guys, they got the suction cups because there's windows up. And usually when I'm working, there's no windows or anything. It's just the concrete frame. So we would have to anchor into the concrete just to tie it off. Otherwise, that thing would just be blowing around in the wind. You can't do anything. You can just be blowing around.
Wow. Yeah, we had some window, I work downtown and we've had window cleaners. Actually, just this past week, it's kind of interesting on a biological standpoint because I'm 16 floors up, but I'm in an old building from the 20s, and but every year the windows get covered by spider webs. Like there's a whole ecosystem. It's kind of like a cliffside to them, because I think the light obviously draws in insects, and the air currents probably blow, all kinds of bugs up there, and so there's generations of spiders. I don't think they're starting out at the ground and making their way all the way up there. I think, wherever the eggs are, and so every year they have to come and clean out, we have this beautiful view of the lake, but it's, you can't take pictures of it because it's all, the windows are all gummed up, but yeah, and actually at the hospital. So, I work at Lurie Children's Hospital downtown. This kind of ties back to Spider Dan Goodman, is that when the window washers do the children's hospital, they dress up like superheroes. So so the kids can see them when they're there. It'll be like, hey, Spider-Man's washing their window, or Batman or whatever, So that's kind of cool
That's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. But that's interesting that you can overcome that. So you had like height issue, fear of.
I hated heights when I started, but it don't bother me at all.
Wow, that's impressive. Because
I'm
sometimes
just the opposite.
But there's hope
I'm
for
the
you,
opposite,
Tony.
Nico. I used to like heights, and now I forget it. For the last 25, 30 years, no way. Or more, maybe even longer. Who knows?
But it's an interesting, and here I'm like a dime store psychologist, but it's one of those things where it's something that can be overcome. That with
Exposure. That's the key.
Was it
Repeated exposure.
Was it like you had fear of heights and they're like, okay, get out there? Or like, were you in a position where you slowly built up to it?
No, it was just, I just got submersed in it. And you
Like,
either
out
gotta
you go.
you either just gotta overcome it or get out, because there's no in between. There's no soft submersion. It's just in or out.
Sink or swim.
Yeah.
Wow. Cause I mean, like I could see like in an open high rise, even getting like within a couple feet of a unprotected, because you don't have any kind of like railings up or anything, like you're just an edge and you're over. My knees would start to lock. I could sense, because I've been in situations like that when I've been at like some of the national parks or whatever, where you get close to the edge of something, your whole body reacts. Like I feel it in my stomach and my knees, but like just being like, okay, you're gonna strap up and out you go. I don't know, man.
Yeah, there's some guys that freeze and they just can't do it. They freeze up, they can't move. There was a guy I worked with, he would get like dizzy and he was gonna fall over. He just couldn't do it. His stomach would tense up and he would freeze. But yeah, it's just I guess it's just overcoming that fear response, because everybody has that innate fear response to heights. You just have to
I wonder if there's, and
somehow overcome it.
I'm not like a psychologist at all, but I'm willing to play one on a podcast. There's like normal fear, because obviously you could die a horrible death. So you're going to be afraid of that. It's natural. But then there's kind of like the paralyzing phobia side, where it's like you like spiral out of control. Like, what I'm saying? Like you should be able to, like I said, in a life or death situation or where you need to, you can overcome a natural, like if you can rationalize, okay, I'm tied into a rope, I got these safety mechanisms, and you can kind of maybe will yourself to take some risks. But other people, it's just like you let the whole body shuts down, like whatever it is. It's almost like a feedback loop or something, where just
Right. Your system gets hijacked by that feedback. For me, it's you have to just focus. You can't be like looking straight down and just focus on falling. You have to focus on what you're doing and looking at what's in front of you. So that's how I overcame it. I can't be looking at the ground and just thinking, oh shit, I'm gonna fall and die. I just got to take my mind and just keep refocusing it to what the task is at hand and what's right in front of me, what I'm looking at, and not focus on looking down and falling. So that's how I did it.
I don't get paralyzed. I mean, I'll go up in the buildings and I just don't feel like, I don't like doing it because, I go, oh boy, but I think for me, the clincher was 9/11, because before that I could justify, well, I can go up into Sears Tower. The building's not going to fall down. Well, look what happens. Right. So when 9/11 came, it kind of solidified like, yeah, this can happen. Right. So I don't know. And then other times death doesn't bother me. It's just I guess it's just like, I don't know. It's strange.
It's like
an interesting phenomenon.
my grandfather used to say, he says, I don't mind death. I just don't want to be there when it happens. He probably,
Right.
yeah,
Right.
that's kind of the same. Like there's death can be okay. It depends how it happens. Falling is a scary one, man. Some of those 9/11 videos, I mean, I think most of them have been censored out or whatever, but I mean, that just added to the horror, because, those choices those poor people had to make, yeah, just, ugh. Speaking of tall buildings, similar situation. And when I was in Bangkok visiting Casey, what's awesome about, obviously Thailand is tropical, it's warm. So all their skyscrapers have rooftop bars. So like you can be 80 stories up and open air and it's comfortable, like in Chicago, I think even maybe in July or August, you'll be okay. Well, you'd know, Nico, I don't know what months, but generally it's probably pretty windy and cold, regardless of the time of the year. It just goes from bad to worse, maybe. But there it's completely comfortable.
In Chicago, it's constant wind when you get up to a certain level. It's just constant wind. I don't know what the mile per hour is on average. I would say at least around 16 to 20 on it. Just an average calm day, 20 mile per hour winds constantly. It never ends when you get to a certain level. But that's Chicago. There's different, depending on the location, there might not be as much wind in different areas.
Well, you have nothing to break the wind, like Cleveland or New York, it's got all that open water, that's that's what's, but if there's mountains around and stuff, that's going to help break that wind.
But yeah, one of the rooftop bars in Bangkok, and like I don't know if you guys will ever find yourself there, but I highly recommend to anybody who's going there to train, go to Thailand to train. I mean, a lot of people think, oh, I'm going to go to Thailand and train and just work out, but it's a beautiful country. Uh, or people just go there to party. That's the other thing. But really, um, besides the ancient culture and all the beautiful stuff that they have there, beautiful temples and ruins and stuff, the rooftop bar I'm thinking of, and I can't remember the name of the building, but if you Google it, if you're going, but basically, so it's as tall as the John Hancock. It's close to 1,000 feet high, but at the top they have a rooftop bar, and then part of that rooftop bar, it has basically roughly about the size maybe of a swimming pool or half a swimming pool, a glass section that goes out off the side of the building. Now it's got a huge, like not fence, but like, barricade. So you're not at any risk, but basically you can walk down some steps and then you're basically standing on very thick glass, looking down 1,000 feet with traffic and everything going under you. It's terrifying. Talking about like, it was interesting to see different people's reactions to it, and what was scary too. So yeah, I was there at night, and they make you take your cell phone, like you have to turn over your cell phone because they don't want you to hold it and like accidentally drop it on the glass, and scuff it up or crack anything. So you walk out there, but you take 2 or 3 steps down, and that last step onto the glass, and I don't know if this was just in my mind, it felt like 2 or 3 inches further. So like you had the sensation of kind of falling a little bit before you step on it. I mean, that was enough to mess me up. There's some people were like, they couldn't walk straight down onto this glass surface. They actually had to turn around on the steps and crawl backwards. Like they couldn't be like your thing. You can't look down at it. It was really funny to see people. And then my son was being a complete asshole. So Ben was with us and he was there. And so we're both standing on, Sasha couldn't even make it onto the glass. She's like, fuck that. But Ben and I were walking around on the glass. And then all of a sudden he starts making these like, I'm going to jump and break the glass kind of motions to me. And I was like, God damn it, stop. Like I couldn't even have him fake that he was going to like jump and shake the thing. I mean, even though it's, he wouldn't have been able to budge it, so my rational mind knew I was completely safe. Maybe there was that part of mine, well, I am in a third world country. Maybe, I don't know what their building standards are here, but I mean, it was actually a super cool skyscraper. If you're into architecture, I should post some pictures of it. But anyways, that was another kind of brush with fear of heights that I had. And it's very cool. If you're there, check it out. I highly recommend it.
Yeah, there's a lot of those buildings are designed by architecture firms here in Chicago. Skidmore, Owings and Merrill or something. That's one of the big
Yeah.
architecture firms, and many buildings in New York were actually designed by architecture firms outside of or from Chicago. But yeah, it's interesting. So the construction techniques though and the concrete has become much more stable. So they can do interesting things that weren't possible times gone by, and who knows what's going to happen in the future. We need to get a structural engineer out here or an architect, on the show to, talk about that. It'd be interesting. That's another interesting thing to talk about, right?
Yeah, they're definitely able to build a lot faster now than they did before with concrete. So I wouldn't say that the concrete is stronger though. I actually think that some of the older concrete is superior. I mean, if you look at ancient Rome, they got buildings made out of concrete. It lasted thousands of years, and we got buildings, 100 years older, falling apart. So I don't think that they have a superior product, but they have better production.
Definitely
No idea.
design has improved though.
Huh?
I was going to say design I know has improved because I remember like the John Hancock, this is just random, but it took a third less steel than it did to do the Empire State Building. Now it's not as tall necessarily, but just generally the engineering, they keep refining it, and figuring out ways of doing it, like you said, quicker, but probably also with less material.
Yeah, but I believe it took exactly 1 year and 1 day to build the Empire State Building. That was fast. And that was the tallest building in the world when it was finished.
For
And
40
it had,
years, it was tallest. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, and then for many years, the Terminal Tower in Cleveland was the tallest building outside of New York. You know, it was over 700 feet tall. So yeah, it's interesting stuff. And who knows? Like I said, they have drawings and ideas of even much more massive buildings than the Burj Khalifa, which was the Burj Dubai originally. So interesting times if you're into that stuff. What else is up? Loyola lost in the final in the basketball tournament yesterday.
So is that over then? I haven't been
No.
watching it all. No. What stage are we at? Who's left?
Well, I don't know all the teams that are left because I didn't check this morning. I didn't see who else lost. But what are we down to now, Nico? I don't think the final four are 8.
I don't keep up with it, so
Yeah.
you're asking the wrong person about that.
Yeah. I'm not a big college basketball fan either. I just know that that Loyola lost yesterday. I saw that. But hey, my baseball is going to be starting very, like the Ronnie Millsap song, any day now. So we'll see how that goes. We'll see what this year brings. Last year, I wasn't even interested. First time in my life, I wasn't interested in baseball because it was such a short season. Nothing really mattered. Let's see what happens this year.
Hey, I got a topic, and this is kind of put you on the spot a little bit, Tony. Something we've kind of broached on before a little bit, but this is more in the realm of the fight game. But like, let's say, all right, you get elected emperor of the world, or you got Jeff Bezos money somehow. This podcast really pays off, and you can make whatever you want. So you've got the money now. You can build basically like a tournament. So we talked about there's always these when we had Javi here, and it would be great. Actually, we probably should revisit this when he's on here because he has a lot more insight on it than probably any of us from all the different kinds of competitions he's done. But if you were going to build one saying, these are the types of fight sport competitions I'd like to see, this is how I would build it. This is, would I use points? Would it be submissions only? Would I allow some kind of ripping? What would be the time limits? Those kind of things. If you could construct it to kind of best preserve your skill set, to kind of promote it, I guess, like saying, this is how I would think, things I'd like to see. Like I said, so you don't have to worry about what the reality is of who are the dominant, that you have to conform to their rules. But this is how I'm going to do it to balance safety, but also keep it real.
Well, I mean, I would take a different approach. I mean, okay, so you got striking sports. They already exist. You got boxing, you got kickboxing, and then you got MMA. Let's just stick with that. Then you got pinning sports where, wrestling, you can pin. Judo, the hold down. Sambo, you can win by a perfect throw. You got submission sports. I guess you would add in the UFC to a degree, jiu-jitsu tournaments, of course, but judo, sambo, okay. You don't have sports where ripping is, to my knowledge, part of it. And you don't, to my knowledge, have a sport where any and all submissions are allowed. There's always some catch. There's always something, small joint manipulations, or you can't do twisting leg locks, or you can't do twisting locks and this and that. So but what I'm getting at is, first and foremost, forget about every rule that already exists. Develop a sport where you can utilize these things that I just said, all known submissions and rips. Get them in the game first and foremost. And from there you work on the safety element of it. Okay. To make sure that somebody's not, being, killed doing this. And then you start adding in flavors. Okay. Like, those are the main ingredients. What do you want to add into it? Strikes. Yeah. I would certainly add in strikes. Pins. No, take them out. Because the predominant sport with pins is wrestling, freestyle, Greco, what have you, another folk style, and I'm sure every other country has their own little, regional things. So you got plenty of that. I think mainly opening up the submission game, opening up the ripping game, uh, really makes a difference. And you know that just from your training. When you start throwing in rips, changes everything. It makes stalling much more difficult. Um, and it takes, the key here is it takes so much less energy than punching. Okay. Uh, and even if you punch, I mean, so I guess what I'm getting at is with submissions, forget the strikes for a second, adding in rips changes the game. And many guys who are unfamiliar with rips find it to be unbelievable, and it changes their whole approach to things, offensively and defensively. So that to me has to be a part of it, and any and all types of submissions. Okay, no more. Well, you can't throw your leg over and do reaps or whatever. Or, I don't know all the terms that they come up with. Just all it is to prevent, to counter their techniques by establishing rules to prevent it from your. You get my point. You got to, instead of learning how to defend, they'll make a rule that'll just forbid something, and I'm against that. So I would do that, and then I would add strikes into it as well. You could even have a separate sport where you can add that in, like the old time pancration back in antiquity. Of course, we actually weren't there. We don't know the true skill level of these people. We know that they were, according to history, at times very barbaric. We don't need to have to go that far. But yeah, I would definitely love to see more sophistication. And trust me, ripping, it's sophisticated. It can really be, when it's done in the hands of a master, very unbelievable. You know that. You've seen it.
What about time limits? What do you think about time limits?
Well, how are we wanting to do this? I mean, if it's for entertainment purposes, to put seats, butts in the seat, you're going to probably have to have time limits, okay? Because what the very early UFCs proved was that people were getting bored watching the grappling that was happening on the ground where, under the guise of, they're being very technical, when in reality, they were stalling. It was a lot of, just, laying down, waiting, throwing the occasional, punch here and there just to keep active. They had to do something because the sport was going down the tubes. So I do believe that, you got to have some sort of compromise. That doesn't mean 3-minute rounds or 5-minute rounds. It could be 10-minute round. It could be whatever. I think you got to get the rules first, as far as techniques, what are allowed, what's not allowed. And then you can factor in time, because you have to remember that you have to be conditioned. If it's a 2-hour round, let's say, you're not going to be able to go full blast for 2 hours. Okay. There's going to be a lot of recuperation needed. So you're going to have guys that may either say, I'm so dominant, I'm going to come out of the blocks and I'm going to overwhelm this guy and knock him out or take him out, or we're going to conserve. We're going to conserve our energy because this could be a long match. Well, when you have that kind of mindset, that could make for a very boring scenario to play out.
What's
So
go
ahead.
I was just gonna say, you could actually have both. You could I think having an unlimited or 2 hours, you're right. I think people would ultimately start conserving. They wouldn't be going necessarily, but you could almost have like different types of, like time limits. Like there could be a speed round, like who's the champion at like a 2-minute match, or, just like, they have that in different sports. Like I think in paintball and stuff, because normally it's the same thing. People can hide and wait, but it's like, no, you've got 60 seconds to get to your objective. So you can't wait or hide. You've got to go in and engage, and people, it kind of goes back to like what promotes the skill set for self-defense, kind of keeping that in mind. Because your earlier question is like, are we trying to put butts in the seat or not? But I think that's a kind of almost like a different question. Yeah, you're right. I would think like, no, what best preserves the skill set? So like, if, it may be not a big money winner, or money maker. But if like we're building something where it's like, this is how people should, engage, if they're going to look for self-defense. So maybe maybe having like a 10-minute time frame where it is, you have time to work the longer game, and then have another one where it's just like, maybe someone's expertise is the speed round, like you got to go in for the takedown. You got to go for the submission. There's no, it kind of becomes like that first round in the Hagler Hearns where it's like, there's no setups. So they're just throwing, you're throwing everything you got because I mean, they didn't have it. They had many rounds to go on, but for their own reasons, they went at it right away, to kind of encourage people to engage as quickly as possible. Do you think there's something to that?
Well, okay, so you're talking about like asking me a question of, developing a system for the toughest men in the world. And anybody who wants to become that, there's going to have to be a payoff in the end, which is financial. So you're not going to get the world's best athletes or potentially the best athletes to enter into this unless there's a big payoff, so always bear that in mind. What is their motivation? But I thought that they did have Shoney Carter used to do, was it Shitacon or something? And I thought that they had like one round where it was kickboxing, one round where it was like grappling only or something like that. Don't quote me on that, but I always thought that there was something like that existed already. But the rules were probably, really prohibited. I don't know. So that would be something to look into. But yeah, you could probably approach it like that. This round is, boxing only. This round is kickboxing. This round is submissions, or this round, and then this round, it's all of it, if you make it that far. I think that would for sure make you probably a more balanced fighter, in the fact that, if I'm only limited in boxing this round, my boxing better be very good, because I won't be able to like tie him up and shoot in and take him down if he's a superior boxer. I have to go toe to toe. And conversely, with the grappling rounds where you can't strike, would be just the opposite. Man, well, now what am I going to do? I got to learn how to grapple. So that would probably, because that's in essence what I did. I learned how to strike first and had to do real good at that. Then I learned how to grapple, so I had to do okay at that. And I'm not the only person that had to probably do that. So for sure. So maybe if you took that kind of approach, Joe, I don't know, but really, I'm going to stick to the fact that you got to let ripping and submissions be a part of it. It boggles my mind how, you can literally pound somebody out, break their arm, choke them unconscious, do this or that, blow out their knee with a heel hook, but yet you won't allow other little things, other types of locks, or techniques or approaches and stuff. I don't get it. But again, I'm an old dinosaur. I come from a different mindset. But I showed you that link. I emailed you that link of Joe Frazier, and he couldn't even grasp it. He was so opposed to the UFC type fights. He's like, you knock a guy down, you attempt to let him get back up. He's got an 8 count to get back to his feet. Remember?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, I don't think it was just beyond his comprehension why you would, it just like his mind was very much, this is how you fight, I mean, and that's how he spent his whole career, his whole life doing this.
Let me, I'm not speaking for Joe Frazier of all people in the world, but I'm going to tell you, he came from, inner city. I came from the inner city, and we know the difference between a fight and a street fight. Okay. And try as they might, they're not making this a street fight. Okay. MMA is not a street fight. I don't care how much they try to. I'm not saying that they market it that way, but back in the 20 some years ago, there were people that were trying to push it that way. And it isn't a street fight. Okay. And anybody who knows the streets knows that. So that's probably where Frazier was coming from. We're athletes, we're competitors, we're sportsmen. Let's give our opponent, a chance. Let's give him, let's give him 8 seconds to get back up or whatever. He's got to beat the 10 count. So I think that's the approach that he's coming from. Now you want me to develop something that is pretty much as close to a street fight, a one-on-one scenario, which right there kind of negates things, and no weapons, which again kind of negates it. So, yeah, I don't know. I think that street fighting is street fighting,
Well,
and I really hope nobody has to deal with a street fight ever.
I'll try and put a finer point on it. I'm definitely, yeah. I mean, there's definitely that artificial nature of any controlled sport as compared to a street fight, because obviously other people can enter into it. You have all these other, the weapons can be, whatever, environmental things. But to me, I guess it's like, what would preserve the art the best, to maintain it. I think that should be the goal. I was thinking of like, the one thing I like about Sambo, just in a very general sense, is they have their purely grappling competition, and then they have combat sambo, which to my understanding, is basically their MMA version. So it's like there's some you can compete in either or, So it's like we could have the grappling catch with and then also the same thing, but hey, now you're allowed to strike. So it's like version A or version B, and people can compete in one or the other or both. But that might be like I think that's a pretty, and I think that's kind of what in a general sense a lot of the martial arts, at least the grappling world, there's people who just grapple, and then sometimes they transition into the MMA portion of it. On the MMA side of things, let's just call it that, which basically means you're allowing striking with your grappling. Some things that I would always do, one of the things I was disappointed in with the UFC, and I understand it kind of goes back to your point of they got to put butts in the seats and they got to not be a banned sport or anything. But I was really disappointed when they got rid of headbutts. I think that makes a big difference for clinching. Even on the ground, I think when those guys were putting someone in the front scissor or the guard, it was actually very risky for them because they had to deal with both hands and the person headbutting them. They couldn't, you were it was more obvious that you were kind of at a risk being on your back there, because you had to deal with multiple weapons. And they kind of took one of those away with the lack of headbutts. The other thing is, I think in my thing is that I would take away hand wraps and gloves, because I think that gives an advantage to the strikers, allows them to hit harder and more, so, I think like a bare knuckle type of MMA scenario, and I wouldn't I'd keep it barefoot too, keep it kind of like it is in that regard, no wrestling shoes or anything. Any thoughts about those? You like
Well,
those?
that's pretty much what I teach. That's how I've always taught, so I'm not against what you're saying there, but again, it's a sport, and the headbutts were probably introduced for safety reasons, and just like you can't kick a down opponent, and all of these other things are safety measures. So I guess what they're saying is it's a sport. You're going to win this belt. It's not a who can win under any situation or any scenario kind of encounter, because then where do you draw the limits? Where let's get rid of the mats now. Let's just fight on concrete. So if I throw the guy, he lands on his head, it's all over. I'm exaggerating to a degree, but I'm thinking that's probably where they were going with this. There's athletic commissions here, and part of it is like, hey, we want to see you again fight maybe in 2 months. We don't want to come visit you, either in a cemetery or in the hospital, because you can no longer compete because of injuries. So I would have to think that that's the big play. And now with all the evidence of all the concussions that didn't exist, years ago, the medical community, talking about it. So, with a lot of, verve here, safety, it's safety first, so, I do think that if you try to start like some sort of, if there's people who just want to say, hey, we want to do what Joe and Tony are saying, and they start some underground stuff, I don't know about that. I mean, that's really where you risk injury, because you're going to have people there that, probably aren't skilled enough, and, can really get themselves in a lot of trouble, get really, really injured. Um, I don't know. I mean, but for me, I mean, I would just think, even in a straight grappling thing, forget about strikes, forget about anything else. They've got to start opening up gripping and submissions, and, you know, get rid of these crazy preconceived ideas, And some of the point systems that I've seen are there. It's why bother? Let's just do this to a submission. Win, winner take all. So let's say you have a time limit and nobody gets submitted, nobody wins. It's got to be a submission or nobody wins.
Have you guys seen that? I think it's in Europe. They have like a 5-on-5 fights, country versus country, and I think it's kind of ridiculous. I only watched a couple YouTube videos on it, but basically, yeah, it's 5 versus 5, and if one guy gets submitted or knocked out or something, then the other guys like jump in on the other fights. So the ones that I saw was basically whoever lost the first fighter, usually that team would just get demolished pretty quickly because then it would be 2-on-1 and then 3-on-2 and so on and so forth. But have you seen that, Joe?
I've seen those
You're
videos.
saying it's like a battle royal?
Yeah.
Well, okay, so it's like a battle royal, but now what happens but the teammates don't fight each other, right?
No, it's
Yeah.
not, it's yeah, you have teams, so it's not every man for himself.
Right.
Right. So it's America versus, Japan, right? So 5
Yeah.
Japanese, 5 Americans.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
Country versus country. Right. And I think it was 5 versus 5.
Well, that's kind of I never heard of that, but so that's kind of an interesting thing. I guess you could. That's an interesting concept. I'd have to see it. I can't judge it, but
We should have you watch some of these clips and then we should maybe
yeah,
talk about
right.
the
Play
next
them and
one.
then I can watch them. I
Yeah.
got the laptop right here in front of me, so yeah, let's you do that because I mean, strategically, I mean, the common sense is, well, here's the thing. Most guys would say, take out their best fighter. Well, you kind of got to watch with that. But I mean, if I know, let's say out of the 5 opponents, I know that one is really the weakest link. Let's get him out. Let's just take the easiest piece out first. Okay. Because if it takes 3 guys to get out their toughest guy, then, the rest of your team is vulnerable. So I would probably think, but I'd have to see the rules. I would say go for the weak guy, get him out. Okay. Like a chess thing. You can't go for the queen right away or the king, whatever, the king. You gotta get the little pawns and shit, whatever. So take the weakest guy out. Now it's 5-on-4, your advantage. And yeah, let's see some of these one of these days. I'd like to watch this.
It's interesting you mentioned the chess analogy because there's I have a chess set that's it's 4 people. It's 4-way chess. So instead of playing just one person, it's kind of set up like a cross. So people around the table, and you can attack anybody to your left, right, or ahead of you, and you have to play exactly that gamble. It's like, do I try to get everybody to gang? Now, this is every man for himself, though. It's not teams. So it's like 4 every man for himself, which could probably be another rule set. But you can try to like make alliances almost, like, hey, and that's, do we all just try like the people I've played it is like, well, who's the real chess savvy guy? Do we just throw everything we've got at him because we know this person's likely going to win? But, if we're all just gunning for them, they're just going to be playing defense as much as possible. Or do you go at, like, exactly like you said, go after the weak link? And the way the rules work is whoever checkmates the ones, like if I get the person to the right, I get their pieces. You know what I'm saying? So you also have to be careful not to be the one to weaken the other person, open the person up for the other person to do the finish, So then whoever claims now, like, let's say you might have 2 queens. Well, then you become very, but that's different because obviously in a human context, you're just removing people. You're not adding anything to your benefit per se.
Well, yeah, and in a street fight, if I'm up against multiple assailants, I now that's a whole different approach because it's just me. So I'm going to probably go for the leader of the pack or the one that I at least think is for a psychological reason and so on. Here you're talking about something different. Teams, 5-on-5, they're trained for this. So, you take their best fighter out. that's still not going to like completely demoralize them. So I would just think you need to have that advantage. 5-4 is better than 5-3, or it's better than 5-5. But again, I'd have to see the rules. I mean, I could reevaluate and say, oh, okay, based on how the rules are. But that's, to me, like it's an interesting concept, you know.
It'd be interesting just as a training, maybe not as a sport, but just saying, hey, let's spar 2 against 1, or, whatever. So the person just has to survive for 30 seconds or a minute, just trying to, because you have to move and react differently. Or yeah, like I was thinking about that story about you and Kevin, didn't you? It was you two against a group of guys, but you had to
Yeah.
have a strategy of like, we got our backs against each other, whatever, however it is you approached it.
Don't let them get behind me. It's basic, yeah, back to back, pretty much, not physically like this, but with space. Um, yeah, I don't want to have anybody coming from behind me. I need you in front so I know what's happening. But yeah, you have to have some basic strategies. Excuse me, but in a 5-on-1 or 4 on whatever it is, multiple assailants or a lot of weapons, and you don't have anything, it's one of those disadvantages that you just might not overcome, and it becomes what's a victory here? Is it a victory only if I make 5 people unconscious? Is it a victory if I'm able to go home? That you have to totally reevaluate it. You can no longer look at it in sportive terms or under sport rules of who's the conqueror and who's the conquest. Okay, who's been vanquished here? I want to survive, man. I don't want to end up in the hospital or worse, or end up in a morgue. So in that regard, okay, I think I come out ahead. That's how you have to look at it and approach things that way. Remember something here. And who was I just? I was just telling somebody that this week about killing, about maybe it was last week's show. I don't even remember now. But if somebody's bound and determined to kill somebody today, you know that's a whole different approach than if somebody is just like maybe out to rob you, okay, and just wants your money. If they can't get the money, okay, I'm getting out of here. It's and you don't know that going into when you have strangers in a sporting event. You don't have those worries, so you can approach things differently. You know, take more gamble, I guess, risk, because you know that there's a referee or somebody there to prevent, hopefully prevent something serious from happening. I just really don't want to wish this on anybody. I mean, these street encounters, man, especially when you're outnumbered and or weapons are drawn. I've been there, done that. I just don't like it. Ask anybody who's been in combat. Unless you're a little on the psycho side, it's yeah, it's just something you don't want to repeat. And sadly, we have people who suffer from PTSD over incidents like this, that you think the fight's over, and then a week later, a month later, a year later, you have nightmares, and then 2 years, and then 10 years, and then 20 years after the fact. Ask anybody who's been involved in serious things. The fight may not end right then and there. It's maybe a fight you're going to be fighting the rest of your life. I'm just trying to tell people this, to save them anguish. Avoidance, man.
Well,
So
like
you got a problem with that? Because we can settle it my way or your way.
I don't know if you're packing though.
Yeah, going back to the topic of the high rises, there was a guy that died on one of my jobs, and just like you were saying, the first guy that responded and got down where he was laying in the elevator shaft, tried to rescue him. That guy was like traumatized from it, and he, like you were saying, he said he kept having recurring nightmares where he was just like replaying the incident, and he wakes up sweating and like can't sleep right, and he was kind of messed up from it. I don't know how he is now, but the same thing that you said was happening to him.
And it's a shame. And back in, well, as long as I can remember, I when I was a little boy, I was raised basically around the World War II vets and World War I guys too. There were people, but generally World War II, and they called it shell shock. Okay, and allegedly there was a guy on my street who he was he had emotional issues, and it was attributed to World War II. And there was another guy on my street at one point, um, who lost his vision. He was completely blinded because of the war. So yeah, we all carry things. I still get nightmares now and then about Kevin and the plane crash that killed him, and I wasn't even on the plane. You know, yeah, and this is the things that some people just, and it's not their fault. They don't think about it. They think about, well, I want to defend myself, and you do. You want to learn how to fight. You want to learn how to defend. Uh, but learning this stuff is only one part of it. You've got to really study the psychology of it. You have to have you have to know agencies that are available in case you are a victim of an assault, or your loved one is, and you need the appropriate agencies to handle that residual trauma. Talk to anybody in the VA. They're overwhelmed with soldiers, sailors, and Marines that are that have lingering issues, and it's sad. I belong to these veterans organizations, and I deal with some guys who aren't even aware. Some are candid about their PTSD, others they're not, and in the end, they're both still troubled. The ones that know that they have it and are getting treatment, and the other ones that aren't aware that they have it. Uh, yeah, it's sad. And that's why my training, that's why I take what I do so seriously, and why I don't really care as much about the sporting aspect of it, because I've seen the damage that can happen in a street fight. Um, uh, and it's bad. You start losing friends, it leaves a mark.
Well, yeah, I think the parallel with veterans and people who've had, been assaulted in the street. I mean, when you talk to those people, you realize you start to get an idea of the human cost of it, and really how, just like for any country, it really has to be your last option. I think people who are kind of, I don't know, dishonest or not unfamiliar with the true cost of it are a little too cavalier. There's a lot of very gung ho people, or, I mean, just like any country has to defend itself, but you really say it really has to be a last option. I think there's so often, whether it's in your personal life or, and as a society, it's a huge gamble when you're making that decision. There's a lot of people are going to be, it's no light decision. And sometimes I feel, either basically it's something we tend to rush into, with not really, really considering the costs. I think, whether you're overconfident, oh, I can destroy this guy, or like it's just a small country or whatever, it doesn't matter. Lives are changed forever as a result of this, or lost completely. And so I do think that there is, a similar kind of, just like I said, any country should think really carefully before, because it's easy to start a fight or start a war. It's much harder to get out of, once it's escalated. And you've got to be, I think, honest with yourself, or be real about what this could cost you or the people around you, and I think, especially if you're, like I said, if you blur that line between sport training and self-defense training, you've got to remind yourself that, yeah, hey, if I get into a street fight, even in like sporting fights, we see sometimes the best man doesn't always win. Sometimes, right. Like we were talking about, like these guys who make one mistake on these climbs and get, hurt. Same thing. You just mess up once, you're not proving you could be your life. And it's this, yeah. And I said, you don't know, like anytime, like, you're in a road rage situation or something, and, you're thinking, well, I could get out and kick this guy's ass or submit him or something. In this country, especially, he's probably carrying, especially, and it's not going to be this is going to be, so really weigh the costs and risks carefully. And I think we have to be very conscious about those in what we do, as we pursue this kind of this pursuit of ours, I guess.
Oh, I totally agree. You have to weigh the pros and cons. And I've said this for years and years. every encounter you get into, you have to expect that to be a deadly encounter. You have to realize that I may lose my life here. And I don't think a lot of people get that, but that's the approach here. So, that gives you a little heightened sense of awareness. It shouldn't give you a heightened sense of fear. So it should just give you the awareness of, do I feel like losing my life today? Right. It makes you aware so you can assess that situation. Um, and whether to just de-escalate it immediately, or ignore it, or go on the offense. And various factors will give you your answer. It's beyond the subject of one video or one podcast or one lesson. There are times when, yeah, you can just walk away from it. And I have, without even acknowledging it. There are other times when I de-escalated it. And there are other times when I had to be proactive. And there was actually times when I wasn't even proactive. I had to be reactive because it happened too quickly. Okay. They made the first move unbeknownst to me. I didn't see it coming or whatever, like, sucker punch kind of thing. And now you're on. And there's nothing, what are you going to do? Most of the time, if I can deflect it, I will. Causes less, less issues sometimes. But other times, man, if you can't do it, then there's no wishy-washy with me. You're either all in, like he said earlier about the fear of heights. It's sink or swim. You either do it or you got to get off the job. That's it. When it comes time to actually fighting, I'm all in. There's no little bit of fighting here. It's 100% all in until I, and only I, think the fight is over. Not you. You can scream and cry all you want. I give up. I give up. When I, and only I, think it's ready to be over with, then it's over with. That's the difference between, and I know it's a little out there for some people, but that's how it's always been in my life. I choose when it's over, not you.
I think taking the ego out of the situation really helps with de-escalating and being able to walk away from an encounter. But is there any way you can train that, basically help someone to just remove their ego from situations?
It starts in the gym, and I've seen more ego bullshit in the gym. I got to tap this guy out, my training partner, this or that. Yes, 100%. You've got it. And the ego plays into everything. Okay. We all have it, to any healthy, functional male, man or woman has an ego. Okay. Can it be controlled? And that's just all there are days, and that, when we've all felt like crap, or maybe we have the flu and we're just weak. We can't even, do anything. Right. And we don't mind sharing that with a loved one. We don't mind letting, somebody obviously physically weaker than you take care of you for the day. That's a sign of keeping your ego intact. And you're right. You need to be that way. It's psychological, and it has to happen in the gym. And so many gyms that I've been exposed to manufacture this testosterone, right? Manufacture this survival of the fittest, da da da. And I just say, okay, you're the biggest, baddest in this gym. Go to another gym. Let's see how big and bad you are there, and so on and so forth. And all it does is set you up for an eventual fall. So yeah, if you can take your ego out of it and say, I don't mind humbling myself for your benefit. Okay. I'll let you get the advantage on me, or I'll do whatever you want. Okay. I'll be your human sparring dummy, right? You'll get more progress there. But Nico, you hit the nail on the head. So much of it in a like is an ego thing. The guy will say something to you. Well, now you got to say something better than him. You got to top him, and then it goes back and forth. And the next thing you know, it's on. So much of that could just be, derailed by, and in a nice, humorous way. It doesn't have to be where you totally capitulate like a weakling, or try to be a smart ass and get everybody to laugh. And now you've inflamed it. I mean, it depends on your scenario, but many times it's just like, wait a minute, and being sincere, let me look at things from your point of view. Let me think about what you just said. Okay. Here's why I don't think you're right. Okay. Sometimes I've seen that happen. I've seen that get in. I mean, I was there as witnesses to see this. And then the two guys end up buying each other drinks and all's forgotten. Sometimes no. Sometimes it's just like you're up against a blockhead. So you're into concrete. You know what to do with concrete block. You got to drill them. Sometimes it does
Oh.
get to that point.
It's interesting. Such a hard substance like concrete, you can't destroy it with with like normal methods you would like wood or another substance. It's vibration that can break apart concrete, and vice versa. You can't break wood with vibration. So it's pretty interesting.
Well, and it's just that way with certain people. You can't get through to certain people verbally or psychologically sometimes with brute force. Okay. You need that vibration. Okay. You need to kind of get them like this, come from different angles, come from a different approach to try to get them to see your point of view. And, many times that's just not possible, especially if they've been hardened by, certain upbringing or certain beliefs. A lot of times it's religious beliefs through their family for, since they were born, and it's very difficult to get through to them. So let me ask you this, because I've been involved with this here in my house with these concrete, these cinder blocks. If I don't have the right drill and I don't have the right drill bit, I'm wasting my time, right? I just got to walk away until I get the proper tools.
Yep.
And that's how you have to deal with some people. Sometimes you just have to walk away because you meaning you or me, we don't have the proper tools to help them or to get through to them. And everything else is just, I'm going to bust my drill bits on this concrete. I'm going to bust my drill. I'm going to injure my hands. I'm going to waste my time. That's how it is with some people. You just eventually have to say, hey, I got to walk away from this. So naturally, I'm saying this more in lines with a physical relationship, but even when you're out in an encounter with a stranger or a relative stranger, someone you don't know that well, there's times when you just have to, just shut up. And that's where your ego comes into play that you mentioned. You cannot take what they're saying, especially if it isn't honestly personal. Don't take it personal. Don't make it personal. And if it's getting to you, walk away. And I have to do that. I don't agree with a lot of people in this area where I live with their opinions. So I either don't go around them, or if I am around them for, because I have no choice, I make sure we don't get into that topic. I try to steer it in some other direction, and I try to do it like a sleight of hand artist. I don't change the subject so abruptly that they know that, I try to do it subtly. I listen to them and I'm like, oh, hey, by the way, I have a problem and I think you can help me. Now you've kind of put them in an elevated position, and it could be something about your car or, cutting grass, or, you have a problem with your lawnmower starting up, and hey, what is your idea on this? What's your opinion? I want to hear it because it's valuable to me. Okay. So you've made an ally. You've diffused the bullshit that's going to go, south fast, and hopefully you can go on with the rest of your time with that person being okay. There's people that works with. There's others that just doesn't. So you walk away.
I think
You
there's
catching all this, Joe?
Yeah, well, it's actually
dime store, drugstore psychology.
Yeah, and that's definitely worth at least 25 cents, I think. But I was thinking actually that, and we've probably talked about this, but I don't know if we've actually done it on the podcast. But this should be part of your training, like where it's, because a lot of people, like, I think not everybody is, comfortable talking or interacting, and it's something you almost have to maybe have them practice. It's kind of like almost role playing with it, where here's a scenario, and like you can have two students saying, okay, your job is to be the asshole, and and this guy's the other job is and I think we talked about how this can get dangerous
Yeah.
because if they know each other, but they have to play the role like they don't know each other necessarily. Like there's, strangers in a bar, they can't do any actual personal attacks about the person's real, but just saying, here's a scenario and let's see if you can talk your way out of it, or here's something that might have been a better way. But I mean, to me, it's like any skill set. Some people it comes natural. Some people are natural fighters. They just get out there and they fight. A lot of us, we need to actually get out there and practice and develop those skills. And I think it's the same thing with these verbal skills and de-escalation. So.
Well, just bear in mind that there's going to be a tremendous amount of people that you're going to encounter that you're not going to get through to them. Okay. Because they're going to look at things that in your world is completely illogical. Okay. In their world, it's, we're the illogical ones. There's just a chasm. Never the twain shall meet. Okay. I was just reading something earlier today before the podcast. I guess this month, it was 7 years ago that the Malaysian airliner crash. What was it? The MH370 and so on. And this person, basically wrote it's their anniversary, 7 years, and this, and this. Nothing's been found. Blah blah blah. And I am, it's 100% concrete proof that it was an alien abduction, and that the spacecraft came, and this is there's people out there like that, okay, that they're not going to listen to anything. They're not going to listen to facts. Their mind is made up, and it's not just made up; it's way out there made up. These are people that on certain subjects you're never going to be able to touch. You're not going to reach. So I just don't want to have anybody that has those kind of beliefs that may be so far out there that they're not willing to listen to legitimate, rational explanations or proof, concrete proof. I don't want those people in my life, because ultimately they could get you in a jackpot. And I've had people like that I've had to kick to the curb because, it's no longer rational thinking.
And yeah, I think you have to be prepared sometimes to deal with even those people, whether it's like you said, just at a certain point, you have to cut your loss and say, nothing's going to be accomplished here by this. We're not getting anywhere because for whatever reason, they're not having a discussion. They're just preaching at you, or, they're not open to, everything's context with it. But yeah, you should actually have a strategy for even those people, whether it's completely okay. I just got to cut this off because this is going nowhere. This is not being constructive.
Well, it's a waste of your time, and your resources. You don't need to. I mean, look, if you want to have a friendly discussion about who the best baseball player was or football, and you want to lay it all out, okay, that's cool. But again, remember what we're talking about here: who the best ball player is. It's something that's a matter of opinion. You can lay out your stats and all of that, but how important of a subject matter really is it? And just bear that in mind. Is it worth losing a friendship? Is it worth losing an hour even of your day and getting all worked up over it? Most of the times I have to say, no, it's not. I'll say Joe Blow's the best. You'll say, somebody else. Yeah, okay, we can agree to disagree. But when they start telling you things that are not in the realm of reality, I had somebody argue with me. This is about 4 or 5 years ago. And he started to get personal. He's trying to tell me that Cleveland, which is where I'm from, is the state capital of Ohio. I didn't know what else to tell him. I'm like, do you want me to look it up?
Do you want something you can Google, I guess.
Right. But it didn't matter. No, it's all bullshit. The internet, the internet, right? The internet's all fake. Okay.
It's the anti-Cleveland conspiracy.
Well, but then the guy was like, meaning me, that I cannot be from Cleveland because I would have known it was the state capital. This is somebody who otherwise would seem kind of rational, but he's not. He's not a rational thinker. So, this is somebody I'm like, I got to disengage with this guy because it's going nowhere. How do you, you're not going to get through to these people.
I know. I try every Sunday to disengage with you guys, but here I am.
Well, we know that you can do it because it's obvious that you've disengaged from any barber So if you can disengage from the haircut industry, you can certainly disengage from us. Right, Nico?
Yeah, I'm sure you guys never heard of it, but you know, Chicago is the state capital of Illinois, right?
Yeah, right. Right.
I
Hey, they
remember-
want us, the downstaters want Chicago to become its own state. They want us to like break away from the rest of Illinois and start our own state, the 51st state.
the
You've
way
heard that
we,
before.
well, I'll take 2 senators. It sounds like a good deal. We get our own, but I guess it'll just be an even split because they'll go the other way. But yeah, that's well on the big subject is that you keep hearing that all over the country. Everybody wants to keep chopping things up and dividing as opposed to coming together, you know. But that's a big topic for another podcast. But yeah, I remember as a kid growing up in Chicago being surprised that Chicago wasn't the capital because you always assume the biggest city or the most important city should be the capital of the state. But you know,
Well,
obviously,
let me just, I want to interrupt you here because I don't want to get into this political thing, but I'm going to touch on it this way. When you talk about chopping things up and separate, when I moved to Chicago, I, I was blown away by the literal hatred that some of the South Side and North Side siders have against each other over baseball and everything. Okay. Now Cleveland had its East Side West Side thing, but we didn't have that. We all rooted for the Indians, the Browns, whatever. Man, so there's like unity that needs to happen here in Chicago, man. I mean, I've seen it where the South Side or the North Side, they don't want to deal with you if you're from cross town.
yeah, I never understood that even as a kid because you know when I was growing up in the '70s, it was just definitely like a wasteland of sports. You know, like we didn't have any. I mean, we had individual athletes who were amazing, but there was no championship. So when the Sox were finally in the World Series, you know, as a North Sider, I was still excited. It's like somebody in Chicago is winning. Holy shit! You know, this is something I got to see. Um, but there were other people who were just like, no, hell no. You know, they're just like. It's just kind of the tribal nature. I mean, I think the thing is we can all get together, you know, and agree and kind of root for each other, except for the Cleveland Browns. I think everybody agrees that we should not be supporting the Cleveland Browns. I think that's where both sides of Chicago come together.
Yeah. You guys keep talking, keep talking. No, but I found that even, okay, so the White Sox had to go through us to make the playoffs in '05. And you know what happened with the Cubs and the Indians. So it's always like Cleveland is pivotal. But once they got through us and they made it to the playoffs, and if you remember that year, the White Sox won 11-1 in the postseason. I was pulling for the White Sox. I truly was. And as a matter of fact, the last game of the World Series, I was at Dye's Den on Irving Park, and that wasn't like a bar that I would hang out at, but I was there, and I saw grown men crying when the Sox won, and that's North Side, okay, but they had a lot of Sox fans there. I was happy for everybody. I mean, I was like awesomely happy that okay, I'm in Chicago now. You know, I've been here almost 20 years at that point. I'm like, good for the White Sox, right? Of course, I don't feel that way about the Cubs because you know they went through my Indians to win the World Series. I wanted my Indians to win, but I saw Cub fans in Dye's Den mocking the 5 or 6 White Sox guys in there. Oh, look at them crybabies, this and that, you know. Oh man, come on, dude. I wouldn't even do that to a Packer fan.
Don't even start it. Oh, what's worse than a Browns fan? A Packers fan. Yeah.
Dallas Cowboy fan.
Oh,
I
yeah.
don't like
Well, yeah. Let's face it. That's not even.
New England Patriots. You want me to go on? I mean, Christ, I even buried the hatchet with the Steelers, you know, because you know my cousin, she's she's Steelers all the way. All right, she doesn't. Her blood is is black and gold. You know, I mean, come on. But yeah, but this was serious. You know, these guys weren't kidding around. I mean, the Cup fans there were like instigating. They were looking for a fight with these White Sox fans. That bothered me because, and I tried to say it. You know, you guys ought to be thankful. I come from a city with just one team. You have 2 teams. You have 2 chances every year, but they're trying to tell me I don't understand. Well, I do understand because we have that rivalry. At least we did in my day, East Side and West Side of Cleveland. Okay, and I mean, I stumbled upon the West Side a few times in my life, but not much. But I don't hate people from the West Side. My high school sweetheart was from the West Side. Some of my friends were from the West Side in high school. Now, I didn't like alienate them. And
Well,
conversely, they didn't do that to me either.
oh man, I mean, you understand. At certain times, people are just going to be assholes. I mean, that's just kind of the bottom line of whatever the subject is, and they're gonna, yeah, try and kick people when they're down or whatever. And it's, and sometimes the sports is that venue for it. But yeah, it's unfortunate, yeah, that people are so get to that point with it. There's a term friendly rivalry, Um, but actually, even talking about the Packers, I mean, I probably shouldn't admit this out loud, being in the Chicagoland area, but like, I definitely picked them over a lot of other teams. They're kind of regional people here, and they do some cool stuff. Like I think all the community, they own like a portion of the team or the stock of the team or something.
Yeah, the fans own the team. Yeah.
Yeah, which is a cool thing, I think, honestly. And like you said, like if the Packers are playing the Cowboys, it's very easy. I want the Midwestern guys to, these guys are regional to us. So it's weird but some people just take that whatever tribalism too far. But
Well, I'm on the cusp over here where I live now. So there's probably, I'd say 55% Bears fans and 45% Packer fans over here. So it's split almost evenly, because I'm so close to the Wisconsin border. But ironically, the Packer fans that are in this general area, they're Cub fans as opposed to Brewer fans, which, well, yeah, because I don't understand all of that. But Milwaukee's had an interesting history with their baseball, the Milwaukee Braves, and then they were in the American League and then National League, so they've kind of been jostled around a little bit. I don't understand that, but kind of like with the Browns leaving Cleveland, and the Browns team that we have now isn't the Browns team that really won the Super Bowl, under the guise of being the Baltimore Ravens. So I don't know.
So
But
the Browns became the Ravens.
yes, yeah, I have no use for the Baltimore thing because see, the Baltimore Colts moved out on the city of Baltimore. It was a terrible thing. And the Baltimore fans, whined and, bitched about it for years and years and years. Then guess what? They allow it to happen to them or to us. They just welcomed Art Modell, the owner of the Browns. They welcomed the Cleveland Browns, and what was it? 2 years later from the move, they win the Super Bowl. That was our team. Basically, the whole team was intact. That should have been the Cleveland Browns Super Bowl championship. But the Rams, they were from Cleveland. People don't realize this, but 60 years ago, 70 years ago, it was the Cleveland Rams, and they left Cleveland. Cleveland was known in the late 40s as the city of champions, okay, because they won the football title and they won the World Series in 48. I mean, Cleveland was a happening, rocking town. It was the 5th largest city in America, population-wise, and it had a small geographic region. So the Northeast Ohio was huge. It was a happening spot. And Cleveland wasn't always the joke that it became, which happened like around in the 60s and whatever. So yeah, I'm very passionate Cleveland supporter. I'm a Cleveland fan, not just of the teams, but of the people and the area. I love Cleveland, and I'll always love Cleveland, and it'll always be my home. Yeah, it'll always be my hometown is Cleveland. And, eventually, when I'm dead, it's going to be, Tony Cecchine from Cleveland, Ohio. That's how it's going to be. I just, that's how I feel.
I think sports would be more interesting to me if the actual athletes were actually from the city they represent. So that it would literally be a representation of the city versus city or state versus state. I think to me, that would make it a lot more interesting.
Well, good. So where I live now, they'd be the champion fishermen or something. They are the champion water ski. That's no joke. They've won the national championships 6 times, I think, in water skiing. And that's no kidding. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. You would want the Chicago Bears players all to be from Chicago. And yeah, it's kind of interesting.
I remember as a kid being kind of disappointed when I first learned that Wait a second. You mean we're just hiring these guys from all over the place? They're not from Chicago? They're not, like someone kind of like hit me to like what was going on. It was a little disillusioning. It's like, we're not like immediately like the whole thing, the whole artificial construct kind of fell apart in front of me. I'm like, they're not from Chicago. Why am I rooting for these guys? It's like, who can ever hire the best gun? But unfortunately, like Nico, to your thing is like all the big cities would win because they have the biggest talent pool, right? So they would always just have, the larger, I mean, occasionally you'd get like a star somewhere just randomly born, but it's kind of and that's the trouble now with money in these cities, right? Where they have to have these salary caps. I don't completely understand it, but they have to kind of like prevent, concentrations of money and population from just being a dynasty forever, because that's a huge advantage in those kind of things. So, but yeah, it is. And like you said, these teams move, it's like these people that we thought were the Cleveland team. Well, it turns out they're just professionals that'll move anywhere. They have nothing to do with Cleveland. They're just a business that's willing to move, So it's all kind of an artificial drama for us to be entertained. We like watching the sports, and it gives us, like I said, it's unscripted drama. You don't know if the good guys are going to win this time, and that's what makes sports engaging. But it's kind of like watching a movie is fiction. You have to kind of check a part of your brain at the door and say, I know this can't happen, but I'm going to be entertained. Or, I know these people aren't from my town, really. It's just a business. It's who hired the best players is really what it's a contest for, and I mean, there's more to it, but really, I mean, it just gives it, you have to like, yeah, kind of go with the program so you can allow yourself to be entertained by it.
Well, on the flip side of that, I find it, like athletes who aren't from, let's say, Cleveland, but they played their career or the bulk of their career in Cleveland, and then after their career's over, they decide to stay in Cleveland or or the area, which is nice. Like even now, I say, I'm a Clevelander, but I'll probably never ever move back. I love Chicago. It's my adopted hometown, I guess. But I give credit to a lot of these athletes that decide to stay in their, the town that they made their, claim to fame in, let's say. Walter Payton is a classic example. He wasn't a Chicagoan, but he moved here and basically stayed here. I mean, Lake Forest or wherever, Barrington, it's same thing. Cleveland had guy, I don't know exactly where Jim Brown lives, but Bob Feller stayed in Cleveland, Reggie Rucker. Um, you know, that's interesting. Does Kerry Wood still live in Chicagoland, or I know Jordan pulled the pin.
Or it was Jordan? He wasn't from Chicago, right?
North Carolina.
Carolina,
Yeah, he was living up in Highland Park. I guess he hasn't lived there in years. I just heard something about them trying to sell his house again, but I don't know where he lives. Um, but I'm not sure where Kerry Wood lives because I thought for a while he was still staying around in Chicago or Chicagoland. But I don't know. But it's those guys, especially the ones who really have money, where they can basically live anywhere that they choose. And if they choose to live in the town, the city that they played in, I give them credit for that. Maybe they bonded with the fans or something.
And they probably have. I mean, like if you spent most of your professional career in one place, you probably had a lot of friends and community. And like, let's say you have kids, and your kids probably have, like this is like Nico probably knows this moving around, but like your kids have schools and friends. It's like to move them. You gotta have you're disrupting their lives too, right? That's a decision as a family person. So a lot of times, yeah, if you set down roots as a family in some place, that's kind of where you are. Although, yeah, if you have Jordan money, you can just buy new friends or whatever.
Boy, well, I don't know. I mean, I was just saying to somebody the other day that I'll probably stay in the Illinois, around here, Chicagoland, I mean, unless an offer comes in, this is all after my mom's situation, but unless a tremendous offer comes in somewhere from, somewhere else in the country, I've already made the big move once, from Cleveland to here. And at my age now, I don't want to go through it all again. The big move to a strange area. I got to get to know everybody. And, even now living out here where I live, hour and a half or so outside of Chicago, I miss the city. Okay. But at least if I could, if situations with my mom were a little bit different, I could get to Chicago. It's different if I'm living in, Topeka, Kansas, or, Ocala, Florida. I mean, I'm like way away from everybody.
Yeah, moving's tough, and yeah, setting up and meeting new people, it's a roll of the dice. You don't know if you're going to like that community, or it's not going to culturally fit with you. You don't want. It takes a lot. It's a definitely big thing.
Well, I'm a city guy. I mean, this living out here has proven that to me. That my place is not to move into somebody else's area and complain. I need to know where I fit in the best. And yes, I fit in a metropolitan area. Now, I don't know if I would fit in a southern metropolitan area like Atlanta, or something like that. I never did it. I would have to certainly spend time down there before I would ever think about moving to it. And I mean, like, not a weekend, but at least a month of just going out, just checking things out and trying to get a feel. But yeah, I like, like, I know I could live in and around New York. I've been there enough times to know, yes, I could live around New York, the Eastern Seaboard up there, because I've been there so many times. I know I fit in out there. Okay. But there's other areas I just, I wouldn't, but why would I want to move out there? Because it's so expensive, and the weather, if anything, is worse than over here. So I might as well just stay here. And there's a lot to being comfortable, especially me, what I don't remember things like I used to. So I like being around where, hey, I know this area or that area. I got old time connections still.
I think my favorite cities outside of Chicago would be Miami and Phoenix, Arizona. I could definitely live in those places.
Yeah, well, you have family in Arizona. I've never been to Miami. I've been to Phoenix. It was just horrendously hot. I mean, I couldn't believe the heat. For me, I just couldn't. The heat was unbelievable.
It's like an oven.
Yeah.
It's really the flip side to our cold. It really is. It really tests your. We have friends that live down there, and they talk about, like, you can't leave. Like, they left some groceries, some soda cans in the garage, and they exploded from the heat. Like, it's stuff like we have trouble with the cold like that. They do. Like, things will just melt. They're just, it's deadly serious, that heat out there. You gotta be ready for it. I think it'd be cool to be there just because of the stars and stuff in Arizona, like that desert sky. You could probably, like, I could spend a year there, just kind of like, there's certain communities I hear that they turn off their lights, like they're like dark communities, so that the people can appreciate the stars. That'd be pretty cool. So I could see, I don't know if I could do it permanently, but I would definitely like to give Arizona a shot for a little while. And Miami, you mentioned that seemed, that's on my list to visit at some point. I love the old Art Deco, like, hotels and stuff, and the Cuban food, man. I love the Cuban food we have here, but it's got to be off the hook down there, man.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
We learned how to make Cuban food at home, and that's all we've been eating mostly since we went down there.
Oh yeah, man.
Say hello to Hyman Roth.
Yeah, exactly. I think they took care of Hyman, if I remember correctly.
It's the day. You never know.
True.
Yeah, I've never been to Miami. I've been to Florida naturally, but not Miami. But I mean, Florida has the temperature, weather-wise, I don't think it's as, heat-wise, it's not as extreme. But I did some research, and the sunniest state is California. They have more sun than any other state.
More fires too.
Well, look at what the bad weather that a lot of Floridians have to face, or, the hurricanes down there, even part of the Gulf Coast and stuff. Yeah, there's, we have our share of troubles up here, but, they have their share too.
Yeah. It's got to pick your poison, I suppose.
Yeah. Yeah. I look at it like, ideally would be to, like, be a what do they call it?
Snowbird, or yeah.
Where you leave for 3 months or so in the winter, go somewhere warm, and then come back up.
That's the absolute right plan, because Chicago is awesome in the spring and summertime, and so yeah, if you can just skip out on the worst of it, maybe skip a few months, because it's just the winter here is not only is it cold, but it just drags on forever. It's like you forget what it is to be warm again, and so yeah, I think the people who are able to retire and do that, I think that is the right plan. there's actually like a whole community in Arizona of expatriates, because I think they're down there for spring training or whatever. There's a lot of like a big cluster of Chicagoans in Arizona. I think you can even get stuffed pizza down there and things. So you're set for a few months.
Yeah, I know somebody from here that goes down there every year. He should be back. If he isn't now, he should be back by April 1st. But yeah, I would probably go all, December, January, February, and get back here in March, just to get ready for spring. I wouldn't want to come here when spring is in full bloom, because you're right. The Midwest, has terrific spring and summer. Cleveland was the same way. Cleveland had a little bit worse winters than here because of where I live. I mean, we got the lake effect like bad from Lake Erie. It's ironic because the official weather forecast or the weather records are at Hopkins Airport, which on the west side. And man, you could have 1 inch of snow at Hopkins Airport and have 7 inches of snow on the east side of Cleveland. So Cleveland's winters are actually worse than the official record, right? So believe me, I've lived in both places. Cleveland's winters are worse than Chicago's, but their spring and summers are relatively the same. It's just, Chicago has, I'm used to Chicago now. I spent more years here in Chicagoland than I have in Ohio, but there's just something nostalgic. And I think because Cleveland's picked on so much and it's a down on your luck city, when I lived in Cleveland, there was still like 750,000 people in that small region, 750,000. Now I think it's 300 and something. That's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just unbelievable. And it's sad, but unlike Illinois, where you have Chicago and then what? Rockford, as far as population. In Cleveland, you have Detroit, Toledo, you have Dayton, you have Cincinnati. So you have like Columbus, of course, the state capital. So you have 500,000 people scattered, in different sections of the state. So the state of Ohio is very close to a population of the state of Illinois. But the bulk of our population, as you know, is up here.
Yeah, it's very concentrated.
Concentrated, yeah. Very concentrated. So, and with that brings prejudice, and that's why a lot of people out here where I live now, rural, they're not into the city. They're not into city people and, you're going to bring your troubles over here and that kind of jazz. I get it, but it is what it is. So I guess on that note, guys, we should probably wrap it up, huh?
Yeah, we talked about a bunch of stuff for sure.
Yeah, we did. We'll
we may have a guest next week. I'll talk to you guys after the show.
Oh, really?
Possibly for our listeners. So, but not 100% guaranteed. So we'll see. Maybe a surprise is in store. But anyways,
I hope it's a good one.
All right. Well, I didn't promise that. It's just a guess. Maybe not a good one, but.
Well, good, Nico. I'll see you here next week, Nico. Hello, Nico?
Hopefully.
Oh, okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can.
I'm getting glitches on my computer right now.
Okay. Yeah, we can do some stuff.
But yeah.
I'll see you guys next week.
Good to see you guys.
Later. Bye.